In our last two examples here on our vector components, I'm going to start the question, give you sort of a skeletal look of how to answer it, and then get you to try it. So I'm actually going to turn this question into a little bit of a U-turn, your turn, not U-turn, your turn kind of question. So we've got three vectors, A, B, and C, and you're not given any picture or diagram for this, so they'll just give you the bare bones, and then we need to add them together. So what we'll do first of all is we're going to try to find the x component and the y component for each of these. So your first step would be to go, well, what is ax, what's bx, and what's cx, and then what's ay, what's by, and what's cy. And then when you figure all those out, the sum of all the x components will be the x component of the resultant. The sum of all the y components will be the y component of the resultant. So that is really your first step, is to do all that and figure out your Rx and your Ry. And then your second step is, well, this is a little bit automatic. You can go and say, I need to find the resultant. So if I have the x and the y, I need to add those together in a Pythagorean way here. So I'm going to say the resultant is going to be the square root of x squared, or rx squared plus ry squared, and we're going to figure out some answer there. And then we're also going to look at the angle, and we're going to say that theta is going to be equal to the inverse tan of, now you recall we're going to need the absolute value. So you're going to figure out the y over the x and make sure those are positive. Remember, those vertical lines mean that they're positive. And then we're going to get some kind of an angle. Now, just before we go and state our answer, we're going to have to look at that Rx and that Ry and figure out, looking at whether they're positive or negative, which quadrant it's in, and then where the angle is, and then what we need to do in terms of, if it's an angle 2, do we have to go 180 minus theta? If it's an angle 3, we go 180 plus theta, and so on. So then I guess, how could we write this? Adjust angle according to quadrant. According to quadrant. Messy writing, I know. So you can sort of think of this here as your reference angle, and then this part here is to figure out what your actual theta is going to be equal to. And then, so that would be part 3. If I'm going to keep a numbering system here, that would be part 3. And then part 4 would be to state your answer. Okay, so then the answer. Okay, so I'm going to pause now, and I'll let you do a bunch of work here, and then I'll come back and I'll just show you the answers. So make sure you have paused. Okay, so when I did my calculator work, I actually did not complete each of these and write it down again. I just wrote down 2.65 times the cos of 140 plus 4.77 times the cos of 252, and so on. And then I figured out what the Rx value was, and it was negative 0.696. And I think it's very important to get used to putting this into the memory. Okay, so on the calculator I was using, not a fancy TI-83, just a $10 calculator, a Casio happens to be. I put this into X. Okay, so I stored that in X. If you're not sure how to do that, please take some time, ask me in class, and we'll figure it out together. And if you need to spend an extra $5 on your calculator, we'll get you one that has more than one memory in it, because it really is nice to also for your y value. So when you do your y values, it's 2.65 times the sine of 140 plus 4.77 times the sine of 252, and so on, and your y value should be something like negative 4.326. Okay, so then when you do your r, and you say rx squared plus ry squared, and again, if you've already put it into your memory, you can just, it looks kind of cool. It looks like square root of x squared plus y squared. And what did I get as an answer? I got 7, I've got to make sure I look at the right place, 4.38. Okay, over there. And then when I did my inverse tan, since they were both negative, the ry and the rx were both negative, type it in, I didn't have to do anything because I realized a negative divided by negative is still going to be a positive. So when I do that inverse tan, what was it? It was hold on a second. I got to find it out again. It was somewhere around 81 degrees. And then for the adjust angle part, I said, oh, well, if the x is negative, and so it would go that way. If the y is negative, then I'm in quadrant number 3. Okay, so if this is my 81 degrees, if this is my theta r, then my theta is going to be equal to 180 degrees. So theta is going to be equal to 180 degrees plus theta r, which is going to be equal to 180 plus 81. So it works out to 261. So the final answer, I would go and make sure I put units in. I'd say 4.38 kilometers at 261 degrees. Okay, so there's a lot of calculator work in this. So if you find yourself that you got something different, what I would recommend is go back and keep keying it in until you get the right answers. And the other thing is, if you can learn how to use your memory, you can follow that general rule of don't rounding off until your final answer. Okay, so let's take a look at the last question here. And this one actually on the booklet said your turn. It says, Meander exits the front door of her home and walks along the path shown in the diagram. The walk consists of 4 legs with the following magnitudes. So A is 46. I think I'm just going to write in these numbers here. So this one's 46. B, which is straight south, is 142. C is 78. And D is 89. Okay, so you're going to do the exact same idea. The first step is to figure out the x and the y components. So if we say ax equals, and then ay equals bx, cx, and there's d, right, dx. So we'll make a space first of all. Okay, and then the sum here, this will be Rx, and this will be Ry. Okay, so looking at A is only going straight to the right. That is a positive X direction. So that one is fairly straightforward in that right away I can go and say, oh, that is going to be positive 46 in the X direction and 0 in the Y direction. Just by looking at that, I can see. B is going straight south. So it's going to be a negative y value. So I'm going to get a by of minus 142 and an x of 0 because it's not going in the x direction at all. C and D is where I'm actually going to have to get in, my directions and my cos and my sine out again. So thinking about, okay, this is vector C. So vector C starts, I'll draw an xy grid right here. Oh, disappears on me. What would the angle be? Well, the counterclockwise angle would be like this. Counterclockwise from east would be that. So in this one, C would be, so 78 at, what direction would that be? That would be 180 plus 30, so that would be 210 degrees. So when I'm figuring out my x and my y components for that, it would be 78 times the cos of 210. I think I need a smaller pen here. Cos 210, and cy will be 78 times the sine of 210. Okay, degrees. Okay, I'm going to give you a second now on your own. Can you figure out what the angle is for D, and then can you write in what dx and dy are? I'll just pause for one moment. Alright, so looking at vector D, I'm going to put a grid where it's starting from, so it's heading off in this direction, so I put the grid here, and that is in the second quadrant. And if I write, that is the angle in counterclockwise from east, it's going to be equal to 180 degrees minus 89, or minus 60, pardon me. 180 degrees minus 60, so I'm going to get 120 degrees there. So it's going to be 89 at 120 degrees. Okay, so writing this part in over here, we get 89 times the cos of 120 and then 89 times the sine of 120. Okay, now overall, I'm just thinking ahead before I even do my x and my y. Just thinking about all the x components here. I'm going to get a positive x here. This is a 0x. This is going to be negative, and that's going to be negative. Overall, it's starting here and it's ending there, so my resultant is actually going to look like this, isn't it? So my resultant is, it seems to me right away, I can see it's going to be in quadrant number 3. My x value should turn out negative, and my y value should turn out negative. So when I do my calculator work, I do get a negative 66.05 for my x resultant, or my x component of the resultant, and for the y component I get a negative 103.92 when I do all those. And again, I would put these in the memory. Okay, now let me just pause and let you finish and see if you can finish this little piece on your own. All right, the next step would be figuring out what your r value is. So my r is equal to the square root of rx squared plus ry squared. So I get an angle, a result of 123. My theta is going to be the inverse tan of the absolute value of the y over the x. Again, since this is both negative, they're both negative, I don't have to worry about ensuring that it's going to be a positive, because a negative divided by negative is a positive. I get 57.56 degrees. And the last part is, I think, okay, if these are both negative, that means that, just like I thought before, my resultant, right, is in quadrant number 3, and I'm going to have to say that here is my 57.56 degrees here. So now I say, okay, that means that my angle is going to be equal to, here I'll make that theta r, so my theta is going to be equal to 180 degrees plus 57.56 degrees. So I will get a final answer of 123 meters at 238 degrees. I like to round off when I look at the data here. If it's given to the nearest degree, I'll give my answer to the nearest degree. Alright, so your homework, which you can do in class, is these two subbles, 3 and 5, and actually when I'm looking at this, so this is the third week worksheet, so we can do the actually worksheet 3 and 4. And tell you the truth, they're pretty easy. Like even number 4, they've got pretty easy questions in there, so it's really not too challenging. I'll give you some a few more challenging questions when we get to the review before the quiz. All right, thanks. I'll see you in class.